Welcome, everyone, and thank you all for being here and joining our Alan Smith Distinguished Lecture Series tonight, featuring absolutely an amazing panel of speakers. I'm Florida Tech President John Nicklow, and we're very proud of this important event in the life of the university. Before we begin, I want to thank a couple people, specifically Alan's wife, Sharon, and thank you so much for being here, Sharon. And I want to thank you and your family for the ongoing support of this incredible lecture series. I also want to acknowledge Sharon's grandson, who's here with us, Joe Del Sasso, right? Yep. Interesting, Joe is a current Florida Tech student, so keeping it in the family, I love this. Yeah, Florida Tech's a family affair. Alan was a longtime leader for General Motors and a valued and trusted member of the Florida Tech Board of Trustees for nearly 30 years, if you can believe that. This series represents his passion for the transportation industry, and the F. Alan Smith Lecture is becoming one of the most notable programs of its kind. Past speakers, just some examples, have included the CEO of United Launch Alliance, ULA, the Senior Vice President for Supply Chain for Walmart, and the founder of CarMax, as well as the president of Virgin Galactic, Mike Moses. We're forever grateful to Alan and to Sharon for helping us to create this program. I also want to acknowledge trustees who are joining us this evening. Frank DeBello. Frank, welcome. Bill Potter, trustee emeritus, and his wife Wendy. I think that's any other trustees here tonight? Thank you both for coming. Some other special guests to acknowledge. Please hold your applause till the end if you don't mind. Joe Bussinger, our Jerome P. Cooper Distinguished Alumni Award winner in 2024. Kim Brickler, our President's Circle Chair. Marty Glickman, former Dean of Engineering. Zach Ewing, there's Zach. Our Gold Alumni Award winner for 2024. And Winston Scott was going to be there, but I think he's back in the green room. You'll learn that in a minute. Who is a former Florida Tech Dean of Aeronautics, Administrator, and of course, astronaut. Thank you all for being here. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our wonderful advancement team, our University Events and Protocol team, the Gleason team, Dining Services for helping to make today possible. Let's give them a round of applause. So you're in for a really great treat this evening. All of our amazing panelists have tremendous experience and insight into space. And they are all Florida Tech alumni or affiliated with Florida Tech, a fact for which we are very Panther proud. And the gentleman who will moderate the panel tonight also has some space experience of his own. John Zarrella was CNN's principal space correspondent for 27 years. He covered every major space story for a generation of Americans, including the 1986 Challenger disaster, John Glenn's return to space in 1998, and the conclusion of the shuttle program in 2011. He figures he witnessed at least 75 shuttle launches, 75. John is also a dear friend of Florida Tech, and we appreciate his time always. So let's get the conversation started. Please welcome your moderator, John Zarrella.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. This is really an honor for me to be doing this. I have a great love of the space program, and again, covered it for all my years at CNN. I heard Frank DeBello. Where's Frank? Is Frank here? Hi, Frank. Frank and I have a love of good Italian food, don't we, Frank? I don't want to waste any time, so let's get right in. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then each of them, after I introduce them, will tell us a little bit more about themselves before we actually dive right into this panel discussion. So first, let me introduce James Jimmy Jenkins. Jimmy. Lauren Ann Graham. Lauren? Lauren Ann. And Winston Scott. Winston? We're all going to be there, so I think these mics will pick us all up. We'll be good. That's the plan anyway, right? We can put a man on the moon, but we can't get the mics to work. We'll be good. So, Jimmy, you want to start us off? A little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. Thanks so much to the institution for inviting me to be part of this. I was in the Army for 28 years, basically air defense and some space operations. And then I've been in the industry for about 12. And a lot of my industry time has been based on the things I did in the military, primarily of offensive space control, communications in space, and other kinds of military applications in space. And I'm currently in a great job in a small company trying to make a difference for our nation.
Hi, I'm Lauren Ann Graham. Recent alum here actually at Florida Tech, but I've been in the industry for quite a few years now. I have a dream of going to space one day, and so Florida Tech was the perfect option for me. But in the past few years, because of my Florida Tech experience, I've just been open to some pretty incredible opportunities. I was in the Launch Control Center for the Artemis 1 launch and got to see the maiden launch for that. And then now I'm actually testing the Orion spacecraft, which is NASA's spacecraft that's going to take humans back to the moon. So I get to be in and outside of that vehicle every single day, making sure its systems are working.
All right, good. Thank you, and good evening. As you already heard, I'm kind of trying to sit in for Joni Higginbotham. But if you take a look at Joni, I'm a poor substitute for her. She's probably a whole lot nicer looking than I am. But Winston Scott, former NASA astronaut, actually spent 27 years on active duty in the Navy. I was a naval aviator. And then selected by NASA for spaceflight training, flew 9 days on Endeavour, then 16 days on Columbia, and then 3 spacewalks. During my tenure, we were preparing to build the International Space Station. So my spacewalks had to do with testing tools and equipment techniques that astronauts later used to build the space station. After leaving active duty, I directed the Space Authority here, Florida Space Authority. It's now called Space Florida. You probably know that name. Then I worked for Jenkins for a couple of years and then spent 15 years here at Florida Tech, as you heard during the introduction. I failed retirement, so I have a position up at Kennedy Space and Visitor Complex as the Director of Programming for the astronauts that come on center up at the Visitor Complex. So it's a pleasure being with you this evening. Thank you.
Thanks to the three of you for being here with us. We know it's going to be really good. Now, there's so much talk right now in what is in the news right now. Layoffs, potential layoffs. What's the future of the Artemis program? There's an asteroid, in 2031 that NASA keeps upticking a little bit the potential for a problem. Lots to talk about. But let's start first with, what do you folks see as the future of space and space exploration? That's a big, broad subject, so.
Well, I think obviously our main goal right now is to have a living, sustainable presence on another planet, whether that be the Mars or, the moon. That's what we're really looking for right now, is how can we get humans there, but this time keep them there. So I think that is truly the drive, and there's so much technology that's currently being invested in and being innovated because, we've gone up there, we've been there before, but now how can we stay there? How can we keep people there? And that brings in all different types of new things, radiation affecting astronauts, or longevity in space and how it affects their bone density. So I think that's the next big thing.
Can you hear me when I talk like this? Do I need the mic? Okay, sorry. So no one knows who I am. That's good. It's even better. So I do agree that space exploration is going to have humans in it, but we are just beginning an era of autonomy. And I think we're going to see a lot more autonomous operations expand in space at a much faster rate than we're probably anticipating. And it will inform us of how better to do the human side better in long-term duration. And science fiction always gets it a little bit wrong, but we're learning how to do this. If you look at the drone that's on Mars, a company that I'm very familiar with now helped invent that drone, And of course, you can't communicate with it in real time. So the hardest part was the algorithm associated with ensuring it could fly autonomously and make decisions in real time that you never could know what was going to happen. We're going to be in that era very soon. Right? We're there in already a lot of capacities. We just don't publicize it. So I think that's going to be something that will be fun to watch.
What happened? There we go. There we go. This topic is such a broad one. You could talk all night long and not cover everything. I agree with what's already been said. Off to the moon with human presence. A continuous human presence, then off to Mars. That's the first planet that we will inhabit. But then we're going to have to go beyond that. And to go beyond that, we're going to have to develop newer and better and faster propulsion systems to get us out of the solar system and then out of our universe ultimately and go other places. I think we're going to need to see a moving away from chemical rockets, which is what we use now. We're literally brute forcing our way in orbit with old chemical rockets. That's going to have to change. We need something long-term, maybe some kind of ion propulsion initially that'll give you a small impulse over long periods of time so that we can get the speeds we need to get to distant planets. We're going to eventually have to abandon the Earth. We're talking about billions of years from now. But if the human race is going to survive, we're going to have to find another place to live. And the other places to live are going to be light years away. And just real quick, if you're not familiar, a light year is roughly 6 trillion miles, 1 light year. And some of the nearest inhabitable planets might be hundreds of light years away. So we've got to figure out a way to get there. We haven't done it yet, but faster than light speed is going to have to be developed at some point between now and when the Earth ceases to exist. So new propulsion systems, new navigation systems, long-term duration living and working in space. The psychology of space is going to be very important. The technical side we will solve, but the human side, how do you get people to work with people, to put aside our differences, to optimize that's going to be a big part of it. So,
one of your old flying buddies, I guess, Franklin Chang Diaz, he's been working on ion propulsion out at his place in Texas. So, and he's made good advances in that.
Yeah, I know Franklin. Franklin was, we overlapped in the astronaut office, a PhD physicist. Franklin has a prototype engine on the space station as we speak, testing it out. And that ion propulsion might be a good intermediate step to matter antimatter drive, which I think we'll develop at one point. This is not just Star Trek stuff. People have extracted small amounts of antimatter in the laboratory. So at some point, I have no doubt, I may not see it in my lifetime, we'll have matter-antimatter reactors and antimatter drive, but that's a long ways off.
There's a lot of talk about you got to transition from chemical, but you're still, even with ion, you need nuclear power as a source of right? You're going to have to.
Absolutely. I don't think I mentioned nuclear. I think after chemical, the next thing we ought to do is nuclear power. The word nuclear freaks people out, but don't let it. Nuclear it can be done safely, it's clean, it's efficient, and we really ought to be using more and more nuclear power here on Earth as well as space travel.
Jimmy, let me ask you, we were talking briefly about all of the space stuff that's up there. There's a lot of junk, and then there's a lot of other stuff that's up there that people have to keep track of. And it's only going to get worse, right? It's not changing.
No, you look today, we have, 5 to 8, 9,000 satellites in space. If you think about those satellites that are functional, every one of them are command and controlled by one dish. By 2030, we're supposed to have 60,000, and that's just an estimate. It's such a proliferation that we as a company, as an example, or like others, are trying to find a way to command and control hundreds of satellites with one entity on Earth. That's a good challenge. But when you have, I know it's kind of scary, but space is now it's always been a domain. It's just now a publicly acknowledged domain in warfare. And we never want, I love the word of General Hyten. He said, if you look at banners, for military banners, they have these streamers that come off of them. A streamer is something that happened in combat. We would never want a streamer on the Space Force banner. It would be just catastrophic to everything we know and love and dear. So being able to manage that space is going to be a challenge in about 4 or 5 years to a degree we're not ready. Today, we can pretty easily launch almost any time and avoid debris. But 4 years ago, we had an incident with aircraft, about 5 instances a week. We're now having over 100 a day in some aircraft that are flying, that you have to watch which flies. The debris that a lot of it we can't track, and every time someone does an experiment in space and blows up a satellite and creates 8,000 more pieces of debris that do not come down for a while, it creates a challenge. And this process is going to evolve. And I think I'm optimistic that we as a nation will share more of the challenges we have militarily in space, so everyone's aware of those challenges in a way that they have not been before, and it'll help us inform us about where we spend money, where we apply resources, and what we do.
You know, I remember talking with Frank, in fact, a few years back, and the thought back then was there'll be a launch a day. We'll have one a day, 306. It's already way beyond that, right? Winston?
We launched 124 just from here. I think that number is 124 last year. 124 last year. It was 72 or something the previous, 124 last year, and we're already up to 70-something this year, I think. So it's growing. It's continuing to grow. Pretty soon it'll be one a day.
It'll be one, and then beyond that, that's going to just, with all the companies coming online.
Yeah, and I wanted to add too, we have these satellites up there. There's about 2,700 of those satellites up there right now that are dead. So we really, truly have no control or track over of a lot of the debris that's up there. And that can even actually go on to impact, astronauts, because we have the ISS up there. So we really need to make sure that we start developing processes to clean up this trash that's up there and deal with it before it even becomes a problem, because now you're not only impacting launches and other satellites, you could even be impacting our astronauts that are living up there and working up there.
Along those lines, too, you have some countries that are deliberately blowing stuff up to demonstrate military prowess. Mm-hmm. So we've got to begin to work with those countries to put in place agreements that we don't do things like that. Now, there are accords being negotiated around the world and trying to get countries to sign them. But it's a challenge, because if you recall, one country deliberately blew a satellite up out of orbit just a few years ago to demonstrate that they could do it. And then we turned around and did the same thing to demonstrate that we could do it. So we want to, the militarization of space is a concern, and it is happening. We responded with development of a space force, which we needed. It was a good decision, but it was done in response to other countries who are militarizing space. So the military actions in space are already increasing junk. The biggest part of junk in space is natural, though. It's micrometeorites. And even though they're very, very small, they're very, very dangerous when they're traveling at thousands of miles per second or whatever. It's very, very dangerous. It wasn't unusual that we would land the space shuttle and have damaged tires or damaged windshields due to micrometeorite impacts on the shuttle. On my space walks, we would try and walk in the wake of the shuttle, trying to hide behind the vehicle to protect us from micrometeorites. And the last tidbit is the space suit that I wore, the big white EMU. The hard upper torso that protects your vital organs was made out of Kevlar, bulletproof vest stuff. And the idea is that if you get hit by a micrometeorite, hopefully that will protect. So space junk.
Hopefully it will protect you.
But space junk is a big problem, and gives me an idea. I think if anybody's interested, see me afterwards. We can maybe start the waste management company for space.
Well, that was another thing. I don't keep bringing them up, but Franklin Chang was working on basically a sweeper that you could deploy in space, right? That would just clean up a lot of the junk, gather it all up, boost it into a higher orbit, or get it down into the ocean, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of stuff being talked about. Let me get to some of that nitty-gritty that we just talked about briefly. NASA, public-private partnerships, commercial versus what do you envision? There's so much talk right now about, is the Artemis program going to survive? are we going to get back to the moon before China gets there? Big issues, important issues. I see you, Brett. Everybody's grabbing. Hold your devices and push the button to talk first.
Yeah, this is a really big topic right now. You know, everybody is kind of asking the questions of what's going on with the Artemis program. But kind of like he said, we are really trying to beat China to space.
Yeah.
And truly, I work on the Orion spacecraft. The Orion spacecraft right now is the only spacecraft that has been tested and proven to go as far as it has been. It's been way past the moon and back, and able to sustain human life in doing that. So we're the only spacecraft that's even capable of doing that right now. And so I think because of that, you know, the Artemis mission itself is still really, really vital, because we really do have unique technology within our program. Now, I could see the mission itself maybe evolving over the years when new technologies arise and there's companies popping up everywhere right now around the Space Coast. I'm sure things will begin to evolve as we have new affordable technologies provided to us. But I think the mission in and of itself is so important right now. But also getting back to the moon. You know, right now Orion is set up to go link up with Gateway, and Gateway is going to be orbiting the moon, and that's what's going to put boots on the moon.
But there won't be Gateway for the first
not the
landing.
First one. No, not the first.
Right? Gateway's down the road.
Down the road. It's kind of to really make it to where anyone can have access to the moon, you know, if so allowed. So I think the program in and of itself is really important, because it is about establishing that presence on the moon.
And you're talking about Orion, but the SLS rocket is the only one that's flown and certified that we know can actually get to the orbit around out there, right?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Did I give you a bad mic?
There we go. Can you hear me now? Yeah, I agree. I think Artemis is important to sustain for a couple of reasons, too. Artemis is a NASA program, whereas SpaceX is a private company contracted by NASA. I think it's important that we maintain a strong government leadership in space. And Orion really is the only program NASA has going, only government program left on the drawing boards. As much as I like what SpaceX is doing, I like them, I admire them, I like Elon Musk, I don't want to put all of my eggs in one basket. I think you need a strong government program leading and doing the esoteric, cutting-edge stuff. And if Orion goes away, then NASA begins to diminish in its importance and its relevance. And pretty soon, we may see private commercial companies leading the space effort. And that bothers me, because private companies, no matter how good they are and how reputable they are, they're profit-driven, whereas the government is not necessarily profit-driven. So from the political standpoint, I think it's important for Orion to sustain.
Well, add a little humor here. We were joking in the green room, no matter what your political affiliation is, we might have someone that really wants their name on the Artemis program and its successful launch and landing on the moon and on Mars. So I'm the optimist that I know there are a lot of challenges with cuts today, but I really believe this is important enough to the nation that it's going to continue in a capacity that might not be to this exact one we want, but I think it'll be on the pace that we need, because it'll be coupled with the other intangible things that entities are doing. You brought it up a little bit. Look what Starlink, you know, everyone in this room watched it get launched just 4 years ago, and it's interesting timing that it was launched, and it immediately had an impact on a combat situation. Those that tracked what was going on in Ukraine and Russia, who had access to information, who did not, who had access to comms, who did not, how you could challenge other people's communications and not. It changed that conflict immediately. And I just believe that's going to continue to proliferate. One more example. In the next few years, we will probably have a completely satellite-based telecommunication system. You'll no longer have to find a tower. You'll no longer have communications travel through a cable undersea. It'll all be in a space-based system. And that comes with great advantages. No longer can you go on vacation and say, sorry, boss, I didn't hear that phone call, which I try to escape on hunting trips. But it also creates some challenges to the ability to take that network out in other ways that we couldn't do before. So there's vulnerability associated with it because you have this ease of access. You're going to live very quickly in a 6G and a 7G world that it's hard to fathom what that is because we're just getting used to 5G and all those unique things that came with it. But it's going to be a great leap forward in how we communicate. And I think it's going to add to the rationale that I had that the U.S. government is going to stay steady in the exploration and what NASA does as at least a tangential part for what the commercial side does.
Do you worry that with all of that being space-based, that you can cut communications to the military from a foreign adversary? I mean,
absolutely. Look, we have stood up offices in every service called Assured PNT, Assured Position, Navigation, and Timing. The way we all navigate on our ways or our whatever app we have would find our friends, find my kid. They're all based on this same technology in essence. And for a while, we didn't worry about it. It was assured. We knew we had it, but now we operate in environments where it's not there. And it's not there because they took the satellite out. It's there because we can do something on Earth. But taking the communication link down definitely becomes a vulnerability that you got to think through. What are your second and tertiary ways to maintain that level of connectivity in the future?
You were telling me a story, too. Sometimes you don't necessarily want your adversary to know what you got, right? And that goes back a ways.
You want me to tell that story?
Sure.
I don't mean stealing all this. This is
Tell
great.
that. I won't give you any more time after the story.
So let me just give you a quick anecdote. A guy named Alexander, who used to lead the National Security Agency, told this story to me and a few others. You know, we found the Enigma machine in World War II, and it changed victory for the Allies. And when you read about the history of it, you get to know the Enigma machine that the Germans used to encrypt their codes. And after the war was over, only about 12 people in the world knew that the U.S. and Great Britain had this machine. And so Truman at the time and Winston Churchill and a few others were sitting around the table to say, well, let's go tell the world of our great success. And some smart person said, let's just wait a couple of weeks. Well, about 2 weeks later, the Russians had left Berlin with an Enigma machine and started using it to send encrypted messages to their forces, how they would maneuver. 10 years later, where their nuclear assets were, how they would attack or not attack America. So we kept it a secret for 30 more years. Never told a soul we knew it. But we had cracked the code on at least one way that a potential adversary was communicating. And the lesson here is a nation has its secrets, and it's there to protect the way of life that we like. And space, like cyber, are probably the top two places that we keep a lot of good secrets for a lot of good reasons to get after sustaining what we want to do as a nation and the way we live.
I had to have you tell that story. I love that story. So let me just switch to...
Can I jump in real quick? It just occurred to me that we've been talking Artemis. There may be a few people in the audience that doesn't know what Artemis is. Artemis is America's return to the moon. Apollo put men on the moon in the 60s. Artemis will put the first woman on the moon. Artemis in mythology was Apollo's twin sister. Thus the name Artemis. And Artemis also was the goddess of the moon. So Artemis has put people on the moon, return to the moon, put the first woman on the moon. We've flown 2 unmanned Artemis flights.
Yes, we had EFT-1, which was the very first test flight, and then we had Artemis-1, which launched about 2 years ago now. And it was pretty much in its complete configuration. It did not have the environmental life support system, which that is the system that keeps the astronauts alive. So for Artemis-2, this will be the very first launch with humans. We have 4 astronauts, and it will also be testing our life support system for the first time as well.
Right. Anyway, Artemis, first woman on the moon.
Let me ask you, switch gears a little bit. So all of us out here, people in the audience, say, okay, so what benefits do I get from all this money that you folks are spending in space? I mean, and I know there's a lot of medical advances, and the GPS comes out of the space program. The tire sensor gauge in your car that says, oh, you got low tire pressure, that came out of the space shuttle program. So tell me, what are some of the benefits that you folks see going forward coming out of what we're doing now and will do in the future?
I'll start, but the list is unlimited. I couldn't name them all because I don't know them all. But let's bring it down closer to home. Everybody know what a Capri Sun is? You send your kids to school? That came from the space program. That's how we drink stuff in space. All of our drinks are in drink bags, all of them. And somebody commercialized it, called it a Capri Sun. So in space, there's powder, and it could be orange, grape, coffee, whatever. You put water in it, shake it up, put your straw in, and you drink it, just like a Capri Sun. In space, you have to close the straw with a clip to keep the water from floating out. So that's just more down to earth. But also other ways that we process foods, your freeze-dried, your preservatives and things like that all come from the space program. A lot of your clothing, the way it's manufactured and made out of the space program. Your protective clothing for first responders, space program. Quiet, more fuel-efficient engines on airplanes, fire-retardant seats on airplanes, space program. The list just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, kind of as to what he said, I have fought that for a long time when people ask me, why all the money? Well, because it's impacting our daily lives. I mean, there's so much technology that we wouldn't have without it, because when you're going to space, you really have to think outside the box, so you get these crazy ideas that lead to this new technology that, Velcro. Velcro is, again, the space industry, so.
The rovers, right, and some of the vehicles that are on Mars. Oh, we're talking about the helicopter. You're going to talk about a lot of AI coming down the road, right? Let me introduce. It's Joan Higginbotham. Hey, Joan. She made it. You all know probably it was easier to fly on a space shuttle than it was to get here from North Carolina.
Yeah, the travel gods were not kind to me today.
So we're just chit-chatting now about a lot of these innovations and things that have come from the space program that benefit us here on Earth. And we were just going to talk real briefly about some of the things that AI technologies, right?
Yeah, we have to use a way to do machine. I separate AI, artificial intelligence, and ML a lot. We're really much more into the machine learning aspect of how we're using data sets than we are in the AI, Jimmy's opinion. But we're doing that at scale in space because we have to. If you think about the orbital mechanics to have one object go find another object in a space environment and then stay around that object and potentially refuel that object, or download new software on that object while they're traveling 27,000 miles per hour, and maybe they have a little turbulence. It's a really good challenge. And you can only do that with the programming that we're developing today to allow those systems to do it autonomously, that I kind of talked about earlier. The other thing I think is going to really come out of this is how we use materials in a way that we haven't completely discovered today. And part of the company I'm in, we're learning how we can use gold and silver on platforms and materials in a way we don't use them today. We use them in space a lot because of their resilience to different elements and the resilience to those different bands of temperature and radiation. But how we're going to use those, we're going to bring back soon, because right now they're kind of semi-militarily unique systems that are protecting something, but it'll bring back to Earth and give us a capability that you will love in the future for yourself. And finally, I would say that the space exploration piece for mining is going to, and you kind of mentioned it, the commercial entity is going to do that. If they can bring back, you love seeing the numbers, a meteorite that is worth $50 quadrillion worth of minerals, they're going to find a way to do it, and it will drive the exploration in a way we haven't done before.
I wanted to say one thing, since Joan is here, just for those of you who don't know, an electrical engineer, rocket scientist, retired astronaut, flew STS-116, right? 116, that was in December of '06. And you flew with Sonny Williams, who's still up there. Not since '06, but
Close.
it's been a while this time.
It has. Actually, we took Sunny up to the space station for her first 4-month stay up there. And despite what the rumor mill is saying, trust me, she is having an absolute blast up there. I think if she could live there forever, she would. So they're not stranded. They're doing very well. And I know when she says that she's enjoying it up there, she truly is.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick. Well, Sunny, an added benefit is Sunny just set a record. Sunny performed a spacewalk a week or so ago. I think she has the longest or the most spacewalks. Is it for everybody or for a woman?
I think it's for a woman, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so the benefit, yeah, she just set a record for the most spacewalks for a woman. Back to the financial thing, though. Sometimes people say all the money we spend in space. I would remind everybody, we don't spend any money in space. We spend all the money down here. Oh, you guys are slow, all right. No, but seriously, I read the money is spent obviously to pay salaries for the cost of living, for infrastructure, all the benefits we get here on Earth. I read a couple of studies. Now, these go way back several years, but one study I read said that for every dollar we invest in the space program, we get a 3-to-1 return. Different studies say for every dollar we invest in the space program, we get a 7-to-1 return. So if you take the most conservative that I read years ago, 3-to-1, I'd love to put my money someplace and get a 3-to-1 return on it.
Joan, now I want you to give some advice to Lauren, because Lauren wants to fly in space. And my question to you is going to be, what do you tell people when they say, gee, I want to be like you and I want to fly in space?
So
And she does, right?
I say set the bar higher, is the first thing I say. But the other thing that I say in all seriousness is if I can do it, I know you can do it. The one thing I tell people is to make sure you're very well-rounded. I think they're looking for a little different type of astronaut now than they did when we were in the Corps, They're looking, one of the biggest things I think that makes you a successful astronaut is knowing how to perform on a team, because it is not about the individual. It is not about me, it's not about Winston as an astronaut, it is about you as the crew, and either you succeed together as a crew or you fail together as a crew. And the more that you can get integrated into your team and learn how to get along. Well, I had a fantastic crew, by the way. Winston may argue with me, but I think I had the best crew ever. Because we got along really well, we played really hard, we studied really hard, and we were really close with one another. So the biggest thing is the team. If you're doing what you're doing now, the academics is already there, so I'm not worried about that part. It's more about the personality, being up there for long duration, getting along with different types of people, and integrating yourself into the team and being a team player. It's all about team and not I, the individual.
So for all of you to answer, what are the biggest challenges going forward to space exploration? Not just exploration, defense, all of that. What are we looking at for the biggest challenges?
I'll start since I have the mic. I think one of the ones, well, I'll list two. One of the ones is, as we're trying to go further into space, deeper into space, is propulsion. We need to get there in a timelier manner. And so I know one of our colleagues, Franklin Chain Diaz, has been working on a nuclear propulsion engine for years, like when I was still in the office, and that's been 10, 12 years ago. So propulsion is going to be really huge. The other thing is, especially when you're thinking about humans going into deep space, the amount of radiation that they're going to sustain and how we're going to do that. And I just thought of third as I was talking, is once we get to where we're going, how are we going to survive? So we're going to need some type of hydroponics, or we're going to do some in situ resources, digging up ice from the moon or Mars, and separating it out into hydrogen and oxygen so we could have water and maybe rocket fuel. But those are just three things that come to my mind very quickly.
I was going to kind of say something along the same lines with the astronauts having exposure to radiation and, having, gravity not working on their bones for that long period of time. Because I think right now The NASA astronaut record for time and space is 371 days. And so if we're talking about going to Mars, you know, it might be 8 to 9 months one way. And so we're talking about a mass amount of time on the human body that we've never seen before. And then also, too, I think another really big challenge right now is for Mars, for instance, the launch window is every, I think, 26 months. So you've got to be prepared for that launch window when it comes, because you've got a few weeks. And if you have people up there, or if it's a resupply mission, or you want to make sure that you're launching on time, because those people are really relying on you and you don't have a lot of time to make it. So it almost has to be a level of perfection too that we're going to have to see.
I kind of a little more esoterical. I think we have to have the political vision, governmental vision that is important, and let's just say in America that we all buy into it and we apply the resources, and that gets back to, you know, the things that are big challenges are always resource constrained by what else are we challenged by as a nation. So I'm all about the more peace we have as a nation, the more we'll spend resources on things that help us as a human species survive better and longer. So things that is kind of intangible, but if you can get those things in the box a little bit and cooperate better as nations among nations and allies, then this becomes even more achievable because we'll apply our nation's treasure to get after it.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's being said. I think one of the biggest challenges, I mentioned this in the green room back there, is the human part, the people part. You know, we can figure out how to navigate and improve propulsion and all that, but can we figure out how to understand people? And when you start going off to Mars, off to the moon and off to Mars, it's going to take a particular type of individual. And there's some people who will probably do well in low Earth orbit and back. Some people go to the moon and back. But when you start going off to Mars, it's a 3-year trip, and it's only 6 of you, and the possibility you may not ever come back. What kind of person do you want on that team that can handle that and can handle it calmly? You know, if you watch science fiction movies on TV, they all have pretty much the same scheme. The crew will launch, something will go wrong, and they freak out, and they start yelling, and they start fighting each other, and they start screaming, and the crew falls apart. Well, that's Hollywood. But it's also reality. You know, how many people under stress fall apart and they're at each other's throats? And to survive, for mission success and for survival, people have to learn in those very, very dangerous, dark moments how to keep calm, pull together, work through it, and survive. So the people variable is the one that's
the
going
big
to be
one.
a big one. That's
a real big one because you're
Absolutely.
confined in a small space for an awful long time if you're going to Mars.
Absolutely.
Even if you can get there in 30 days with some other new technologies, it's still a hike. And then you're right. And now, I mean, people might not know, but we do, on a small degree, use nuclear power in spacecraft. The RTGs, radioisotope thermoelectric generators, right? I mean, I think the Perseverance rover is powered by an RTG, and some of the deep space probes have. So there's a lot of experience that NASA has with nuclear, right?
So yeah, actually when I was working down at the Cape, and it was the early 1990s, I think it was Cassini that we launched that had an RTG, and at the time it was very controversial. So we've been doing it for quite some time. It's just getting to the point where we can control it and get it to Mars in a little faster manner. But yeah, we do absolutely have.
I remember
some
there were people
credibility.
storming the
were.
gates. Was it that
Yes.
Galileo? Was it the Galileo mission?
It may have been
I
Galileo.
think it was
yeah.
Galileo, and they were trying to get over the Air Force
Yes.
barriers to get in there, the protesters. I remember that.
Never a dull day.
One more question, and then we're going to open it up to all of you to talk and give us your questions. But one more, personal reflection from each of you on space exploration, things we haven't covered yet. There's a lot we haven't had a chance to cover. We can go on, but it's almost time for dinner and I'm hungry. No. So if you can give us your personal reflections.
I will give a quick personal reflection, and it talks to Winston's point of the people on the crew. And so I said I thought we had the best crew ever, and I refer to my crew as the mini United Nations crew, because on the shuttle we had a little bit of everything. So my commander was Russian, Jew, and Korean. We had 2 African-American astronauts on board, the first time 2 had ever flown together. Sunny was on board. Her parents are from India. We had the first Scandinavian astronaut from Norway and Sweden. We had Nick Patrick was actually born in the UK, who became an American citizen. And then on the space station, we had a Russian, we had a German astronaut, and we had a Spanish-American astronaut. And so that's why I kind of refer to us as the mini United Nations. I mean, we had a lot going on. We spoke about 5 languages, represented 4 different space agencies in 3 countries. And as we were going over the Middle East one day, I was looking out the window, and at the time there's only one window on the space station. It was on the Russian segment. And I was looking out. And as we were going over the Middle East, I said, think about all the discord and unrest in the region. And I literally just stopped. Well, I didn't stop, but I kind of froze in my tracks. And I looked back inside and I said, look at all of us, with all of our quote unquote differences. But look at all of us with all of our differences in this tin can of a spacecraft working together for a common good. And if we can do that in this little cramped tin can of a spacecraft, why can't we do that on Earth where there's so much more space? So that's my reflection.
Yeah, that was stated so beautifully. Actually, I was, funny enough, going to say the same thing just about the people that I've already encountered in the space industry. It just seems, in my time at Florida Tech, but then also my time working up at NASA, just the people are incredible, and they're so dedicated, they're so passionate, and they're so kind and always willing to help. That's something that really has inspired me about the space industry. I grew up wanting to be an astronaut. I grew up, watching all the documentaries and all the movies, but you don't really, know the people until you get into it. And that has been one thing that has been really life-changing for me, is everyone is so willing to help, so kind, so passionate. They've been there 20, 30 years. They want to see your dreams come true. So I really hope that the space industry can continue to just bring that message of peace to the world when we really need it.
Yeah.
You're tapped out, Jimmy? You're done?
I cannot top that. I love what you said. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll reflect also, and I certainly agree with what Joan said, what has been said. One of the things that come to mind is just the view of the Earth from space. When you're on Earth or in an airplane, no matter how high you are, this is my analogy, you can only see to the horizon. But when you're in space, you see the horizon, but then you can see out past the horizon. And you realize how small and how finite the Earth is. There's all this other stuff out there, and the Earth, in the total scheme of things, is just a small, insignificant speck of dust. It's important to us because we live here, but it's so small, it's so fragile looking. The atmosphere is paper thin. It looks paper thin, and it looks like any moment it could just wisp away. And the atmosphere is what sustains us. And I can remember the brightness and the color. The Earth is so very, very, very colorful. You'd be amazed. The oceans are colorful. The deserts are colorful. Everything is so bright. And it looks so peaceful. I didn't see any turmoil from up there. The whole Earth looks peaceful, and you just wish that somehow maybe one day we'll find a way to have that peace really all over the world on the surface.
I always believed that the greatest benefit, we talked about the shuttle program, was the fact that so many people from so many different nations around the world got an opportunity to fly in space who never would have gotten that with any other vehicle. Whatever you say about the shuttle and shuttle program, that was one of the great benefits. Now, if you could line up, anybody have questions? We have microphones on either side, so please come up with your questions. If you don't, I'm going to have to keep talking, and we don't want that to happen. So, and just address your question to whomever, the entire panel or individuals, and state your name.
Good evening. My name is William Kirksey. I would like to know what role does the panel think that America's spaceports are going to play in creating this next 40 years of the future space program?
Mr. Mercer, thanks. You were looking at me asking that. You know, the Space Force was created because space is now it's always been a domain. It's now a contested domain. And I think their number one objective is to protect that domain for the freedom of maneuver, for the freedom of spacecraft, for the freedom of human exploration, for the freedom of anyone to use it for a peaceful means on the globe. And that's not an easy task, but that's firmly their mission set. And by doing that, in doing that, you know, knowing where things are, knowing what people are up to, having ways to deter adversarial behavior are part of that mission set. And I believe that's their foremost mission to make this more of a reality for the next millennium.
Another question?
Thank you. This question is geared towards Lauren. For you to be able to have graduated so recently, yet be able to say you've been working in this industry for years, and to be working on Orion as someone so young, what kind of pathway and projects did you take on at school to get where you are now, and what would you recommend?
So did you ask what the pathway I took to get there was in school?
Yeah.
It's
kind of like what projects did you take on at school? What were you able to do to get to where you are now?
Yeah, so I did go to Florida Tech for both my undergrad and my grad, and the projects and the internships that you take on are so important because they are what got me, you know, my internships and led to jobs. So, for instance, in my undergrad, I did 2.5 years at Larson Motorsports as a jet propulsion engineer. That's where I got all my hands-on experience, and I was really getting dirty with my hands and learning hardware. And then, you know, fast forward to grad school, I was able to finally land my first NASA internship, which led to another, and that got me in the door of NASA and meeting the incredible people there, which eventually led towards the job that I have now. So internships are really, really, really important. They get you in the industry, you're meeting professionals, and you're doing work that's actually really applicable to, you know, the industry as it is right now. I also, you know, your senior design projects are really important. Be really involved in those, have a lead position in them, make sure you're getting that experience. And joining a club on campus, whether it's, you know, the Rocket Tree Club or something along that lines that really align with your major and what you're doing. Again, just more experience that you can add to your resume. And that's really what people are looking for these days when they're hiring, is that experience.
I'm going to grab this side of the room.
I'm John Cornell. I work in the advancement office, and I was blessed and honored to sit 2 offices down from Winston for a year or two when I first got to Florida Tech. And Winston's office was like a museum. I would just go in there and just like look at all this stuff. But when we moved our building, Winston had emptied his office into his red Corvette, which I was very jealous of every day as well. And we were going through and we were doing final cleanings of the building, and I found a box in Winston's office. It has a name, very nice box, it has his name on it. And I said, maybe we need to call him and see what this is. And I opened up and it was a heat shield from the space shuttle. And so I called you, Winston, and was like, do you want this? Because I could probably get a lot on eBay for it. But you wanted it, you came and got it, which was great. But so my question is, for everyone, Lauren Ann, Jimmy, Joan, you guys have really cool jobs. What are some of the cool, fun stuff that you've either been able to do because of your job, or what you've got in your office that people would come in and be like, oh my God, like here's a piece of an actual space shuttle heat shield that landed?
So it's hard to narrow down the cool things I've gotten to do. There are just so many. But I would say the biggest thing is traveling, meeting people, and talking to them. I think that's probably the biggest joy that I've gotten from having this job. The coolest thing I have were the hold-down posts from the shuttle. So they're these big frangible nuts. They're huge. And when they're pyrotechnics that make them explode. So they take them and make them into bookends. So on the bottom, I guess I shouldn't say on the bottom shelf, but on the lower shelf, because they're so heavy, I have the frangible nuts that held the shuttle down as my bookends. So that's a pretty cool thing that I have.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's so many cool things you have. You can't. It's very difficult to narrow it down. You know, one of the coolest things I have. It did not come from the space shuttles. By Navy days, I was flying F-14s, Tomcat in the Navy, and we were doing in-flight refueling practice one night when you pull up behind the tanker, and the tanker streams a hose and basket, and then you put the probe out on your airplane, you plug the probe into the basket, and then the tanker gives you fuel, so you fly, you refuel in flight. And it's on a hose like a big water hose. Well, I pull up to the tanker, and I hit the hose, and you have to push in a little bit. The take-up reel didn't work. So when I pushed in, I got a big sine wave that went up the hole, and my eyes got big, and before I could pull out, the sine wave went all the way up to the tanker, reflected back, and boom, and ripped the hose off. And this fuel was spewing all over my canopy, and I'm worried that fuel will go down the right engine and flame the engine out. Engine kept running, the probe was out, the basket was hooked onto my probe. So I turn around and fly home at slow speed and land. As soon as I land and slow down, the basket tumbles off and rolls down the runway. But they had to change the tip of my in-flight refueling probe, and when they pulled the old one off, they made it into a plaque, and they gave it to me. I've got that one. Let me relate one more thing to you that's kind of cool, too. It's not a souvenir, but I was flying an A-7 one. A-7 was a single-seat light attack carrier-based airplane. I was out doing night flying just to get, everything happens at night. So, I'm flying out at the field. So in the A-7 at the field, when it's raining, you're taking a rested landing. There's a resting gear at the field because you can't get the airplane stopped on the wet runway. You run off the end of an 8,000-foot runway. So I lower the hook. I'm coming down in the rain, in the dark, and I land, and I catch the resting hook, and I stop. I'm just sitting there waiting. I'm waiting on the ground crew to come out and get me out of the resting gear so I can taxi in. And finally, I asked the tower, what's taking the crew so long to get me out of the gear? And the guy comes up the tower and said, you hit a deer, sir. I said, what? You hit a deer. So it turns out there must have been a deer along the side of the runway someplace when I landed. And the cockpit is way up front. The wings are back behind you, and the landing gear doors. The deer must have panicked, rung out. The gear doors cut the deer in half. I hope there are no animal rights people in here. And didn't damage the airplane. But anyway, long story short is the crew chiefs got the deer, and they dressed the guy to have a barbecue, and they gave me the antlers off the deer. And they painted a deer on the side of my airplane. So I was trying to figure out how I could get 4 more, I could be an ace. So.
Over here, we got one more question.
So I know that you guys are incredibly successful and you kind of carved your own way to get to where you are now. I just wanted to know, what are some of the, some tips so I can end up maybe one day in your seat?
I think your support group is a big piece of it too. You know, there's internships, there's experiences and things like that. I think also surrounding yourself with an incredible support group of people is really important. My family is everything to me, and they have pushed me since I was 5 years old, and I drew the picture that said I wanted to go to the moon. So if it weren't for them, I really don't think I would be in the place that I'm at. But then also even in school, I just found this incredible community here at Florida Tech, and without them, I don't think I'd be where I'm at either. So I think having the support group of people who are also really ambitious, who have those big goals, who want to go do incredible things, it's really important to surround yourself with those people that are thinking like-minded, just like that as well.
We have another question. Oh, you want to go ahead, Jimmy?
Well, I'll just say real quickly, I was a very poor undergraduate college student. But I one day grew up, and I think I grew up when I just took responsibility for all that I was and all that I was not and said, it's on me. What kind of person do I want to be? And it flipped the switch for me from being a fairly poor undergrad student to an excellent FIT master's student, which helped propel me in other ways. So that'd be my little tip.
I think we have one more question.
Hi, it's an honor to say hi to you all. My name is Jennifer. I'm a physical science teacher at Heritage High School, just nearby. I'm just coming to say that it's been a pleasure to hear everything that you all have to say. I have so many questions to ask, but if I could ask one, is currently I have a drone club that I operate once a week. I try to get drone operators to come out, and I want my kids to be really excited about science. And being on the Space Coast, I figured we should probably be doing some space-related projects. So I was gifted some drones from FPL, and I've been working with a company called Drones in School to bring the curriculum and in the high school and make learning fun. And so I guess my question is, do you possibly have any connections or have you reached out to high schools or colleges? Because I would be definitely open to learning how to upgrade myself to then give to my 200 students that I teach every day.
Yeah, one thing you can do is, if you haven't already done it, is connect up with the Kennedy Space Center up at the Astronaut Memorial Foundation, Astronaut Scholarship Foundation. It's right up at KSC Visitor Complex, and it's run by Thad Altman. And the folks up there do all kinds of teacher resource work and teacher education work and reach out to educators. There are programs up there, materials and everything, and guidance that's all free and open to you as a teacher to help you in whatever way you would like to move in terms of your teaching. They're getting ready to have Educator Night Out up at KSC, and I don't remember the exact date off the top of my head because it's coming up over the next couple of months. It's free and open to educators in Brevard County, so I urge you to take advantage of that and just get acquainted with the folks up there. Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation. You can Google it. It will come up, and then you can make contact with the folks up there.
Thank you so much.
Two things for you too. FIT is building a drone lab, an inside drone lab. Are you familiar with that at all?
I haven't heard of it.
So we can find the connections after this for that to get maybe your students to come see what college students are trying to do to learn the next level of operating these, learning from them in space. The second thing is we can connect afterwards, and I'm part of one of the largest drone companies in the world, Air Environment and Blue Halo. We're going to merge here very soon, and I'll be glad to talk to your students or create online seminars to let us zoom into your class, and I'll let some of my scientists tell you what we're up to, and maybe it'll inspire them in a way that I couldn't do.
That sounds really cool. My club is growing every day. They think science is fun, and I want to focus on racing. I actually spoke with a couple high school and middle school teachers in Brevard County, and we were all gifted drones from FPL, but no one knows how to use them. I'm currently teaching myself how to solder. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm, happy to make some smart friends I'm eager to learn. I love learning, and my kids like learning, and I'm just trying to build something cool, and I would love to help host drone races in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we wrap up here this evening, this is really a lot about inspiration and outreach. How do we continue to get young folks like the brilliant minds that are here to engage in STEM? And what do we need to do, because you can't have enough smart folks?
I am huge in STEM outreach. I love it so much. You can find me on Instagram at NASA Lag, and if you ever have any questions or anything, or you want me to talk to your classroom, I do Zooms all the time. But I think meeting them where they're at on these platforms is really important. I know there's quite a few creators right now that are really geared towards teaching students about space online. So on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, they're making these really interactive, fun, short, just this content that is engaging. It teaches you something quick, but it makes them excited. It plants a seed where, oh, that's really interesting. Maybe I need to look more into it. So I think meeting them where they're at right now, which a lot is online, is really, really important, and it's going to be the next level of outreach for the upcoming generation.
And I would say early exposure. I don't know, I love math and science, don't know that I would have known what to do with it if I had not been introduced to a program called Inroads, which at the time was a pre-engineering program for women and minorities. So early exposure, hands-on, immersive experiences, because if you're trying to teach theory, you'll just watch their eyes glaze over. But if they can take something and make a circuit and close the circuit and the light bulb comes on, there's a sense of accomplishment there. So hands-on, and I cannot say enough about representation. It matters. The reason I'm an engineer is because I saw people that look like me that are engineers. So those are some other things as well.
Okay. So my question to all of you, did you have a good time? Did you enjoy this? Is it good? Great round of applause for our panel. Thank you all for coming, and thanks to all of you. One more thing. They're going to stay for a few more minutes if you have questions. If you want to ask them anything, they'll be here. So I guess you'll have to kind of go to the edge of the stage or come down this way. What? Why don't you come down around here? And there are refreshments out front.